And if you're new to the show and the station, we are your home of the Dallas Cowboys. Not saying that as proudly these days. And your home of the world champion Texas Rangers. But it is an annual segment that we do. Certainly in the 13 years of this show, and probably the Jagger was probably doing this before us. You're watching the divisional round. Shout out Jagger, by the way. Love Jagger.
Jagger Mafia.
That's right.
The divisional round and then stacking yourself up. I feel like we can go through each game and pick something that one of the teams did and be like, the Cowboys can't do that. The Cowboys couldn't stay on the field with that. That's what my whole day went in yesterday with Mikey, as he's like, can you imagine the Cowboys being on the field with this Kansas City Buffalo heavyweight fight? Can you imagine Dak exchanging playoff roundhouses the way Mahomes and Allen were doing early on? So was there a particular game? I know the easy one to focus on is Green Bay San Fran. That or another game stylistically measuring up that you were thinking of the Cowboys in your mind the most? I think we should probably start with Green Bay San Fran. Did the outcome of that game, Tolos, make you feel better about the way that the Cowboys lost? I will admit this, as we just talked about in the Expressway, I was a number of drinks in Saturday night, so I went home, and I'm watching Green Bay get ready to pull this off, and I didn't feel better about the Cowboys' effort. I'm separating this. Egg yolk. Nothing will ever excuse their effort and the coaching plan. I did feel better about the quality of the Packers. I'm like, okay, this team, we just disrespected them, we overlooked them, and this team is legit because they're going to win this game. They're in control here. So I felt better about the opponent that the Cowboys faced, not the way that the Cowboys played, not the way that they quit, their holes, their coaching, but I did feel better from that aspect. I was just too inebriated to tweet it all out specifically.
Youngest roster, right? Green Bay?
Yep.
So I think we're going to look back in like maybe 2 or 3 years, and then this we may be caught in the moment here, but look at those receivers and like, man, they got some guys.
They're good. They're really good. They're just not names.
They're not names.
And there's not a true one, but they're good.
Right. Dobbs is a good player. It was Weeks, a good player.
Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, they're good.
Yeah, they got good players. So I think we're going to look back and like, you know what? That loss. Now getting out to 27-0 in the first 19 minutes is not good, or whatever. But that loss wasn't like, okay, that's.
I'll tell you what I took away from.
You felt a little bit better?
I felt better. I mean, Green Bay, they took it to San Fran, man. They had that game. They had that game won. If they kick that field goal, they make that field goal. They're going down the field with the ball at the end.
Would have been a
tie
7-point game.
It would have been a tie game at the end, assuming that San Fran scores, which I'm sure they would have. But did they get the ball back? Did you go to overtime? Who knows what happens?
The thing that I come away from that game with, obviously, like, we already know who San Francisco is and what they do. So that's not what stands out to me. What stood out to me, though, was, like, Matt LaFleur's such a damn good, like, play designer. And the way, like, I have not seen anybody this year have plays drawn up where they're throwing the ball and it's 15 yards in the field. It's like there's nobody within 5 yards of this guy. Like there's no one. Like San Francisco was completely confused by a lot of what he was trying to do. That's a big part of the advantage they have. I think the biggest advantage right now, obviously Love, when you have somebody who can execute it, it's a big plus. But LaFleur gives them such an advantage schematically compared to other teams. He's such a sharp play designer.
Pepe, you feel better about what happened to the Cowboys after the fight that Green Bay gave San Fran?
I gave more respect to Green Bay after putting up a fight against San Fran. But, I mean, feeling better, no, because you still got blown out you still got dominated by the Packers. You shouldn't have. On paper, the Cowboys, talent-wise, are 10 times better than the Packers. Should have been. And they got blown out. They got exposed. So, a little better maybe, but not really.
Any of the other games where you were matching up, taking something from Cowboys comparison in your mind?
I mean, look, I think the Cowboys could not have beat Baltimore. Like, let's go to the AFC. They were not on the same field as Kansas City Buffalo. You could see the Kansas City Buffalo was a different animal. They could have beat Detroit. I don't think Detroit played their best game. I thought they went away from the run early on too much, and then they finally went to it in the second half. They started having their offense really started to click. But I don't know if they match up with their receivers though. I mean, they already beat them, but do they beat them on that field in Detroit on that night? Probably not. But I think they could have hung with either one of those two teams. They could have beat Tampa.
I don't think I think on a given game, like Dallas could beat Kansas City. Like I don't think Kansas City stylistically is too much for them. I think right now with Kansas City being depleted, I don't think just because Buffalo beats you down and then Kansas City beats Buffalo on the road, I don't think I can pass that on and say Dallas can't beat them. I do think Dallas this year, just this year, 2023 Cowboys would beat 2023 Chiefs 6 out of 10 times on a neutral field. I do think. But one of the things in general that I took away was 3 of the 4 teams that won this week have really, really good linebacker play. And Dallas just doesn't, and it always kills them. Like, I mean, San Francisco and Baltimore have the 2 best linebacker crews in the NFL, and they're the 2 best teams in the NFL.
David Hellman had an awesome tweet on this. 4 of the 6 All-Pro linebackers for 2023 were drafted outside the top 50. 4 of the 6 All-Pro. Only 1 was drafted in the top 15. Good linebacker play is incredibly valuable, much like good running back play, but unless it's a truly special talent like Roquan or CMC for the running backs, you can also find it all over the place. And I thought that was a great tweet.
And this is not any sort of a, boy, that would have been the whole difference. Believe me, it's not. I still believe they probably get worked against Green Bay because they were terrified. And I don't think it changes any of the outcomes of the games. But I will say, they are so high on what DeMarvion Overshown can do. And we're so excited to have him this year. When they lost him in the preseason, that did really screw up a lot, of what they want to do.
He's outside top 50, right?
Yeah, he was 3rd round pick. And he was like, I mean, I remember the Jacksonville game in the preseason. He stood somebody up, and he stood up Tank Bigsby, who is a big, physical, powerful, just like stopped him in the hole, moved him back, had like 6 tackles in 20 plays or something in one of the games. He is such a dynamic player. And I think Quinn had a ton of ideas for like, hey, I'm going to use him like this. Imagine how they used Marquise Bell, who had a decent year. He gets blocked up a lot because he's smaller. But imagine Marquise Bell, but you're like 30 pounds heavier, and you've got more muscle. That's what they want Overshown to be.
Yeah, I mean, I look at look at Detroit in this game or this year. Like, they drafted a running back and a linebacker in the first round, which generally is not, recommended.
People last night were saying, see?
Yeah.
You questioned Jahmyr Gibbs. Here's Jahmyr Gibbs.
But look how they use him. They barely use him. He is splitting carries. He's barely used. I still wouldn't recommend it necessarily.
Well, and he's a difference maker as a pass catcher, too.
But,
he could play receiver almost.
But this, for a very short term, and I think the Lions do have a short-term plan, he works well for him. He works really, really well.
All right, speaking of Dak and, all the fighting and the quarterback drama, what about a lesson in quarterback patience from the earlier game yesterday?
Well, that's also key, and this is the Tampa-Detroit game. Now, I don't think Baker's going to be like this game-changing quarterback, but I do think you could have him as your QB.
He played well.
And he could make the playoffs.
I'm happy for him.
Yeah, I'm happy for him, too. And he could win you games. Like, he's got a good arm. He's tough. He had guts. I mean, like, there was a few times in that game where you're like, all right, maybe this is where Detroit's going to take this thing over. They need one stop.
Yep.
And, he kind of picked him apart at times. And then on the other side, there's Goff, who, when you pressure him, he definitely has his limits. But when he's given time, I mean, that dude could pick you apart too. And, the problem, this is part of the problem with the evaluation of quarterbacks. Some guys figure it out instantly, like Stroud or Mahomes, first year starting, Love, first year starting. And there's others that figure it out like every year a little bit more. Like, I think Romo, he had a really good start to his career, but he sat for a while. But he really figured it out like in that 2014 season.
Yeah.
Like, he figured out, like he knew all the answers, all the tests.
So what's the timelines for Baker, Goff, Dak?
Well, Goff and Dak are on the same timeline. They were drafted the same year. Baker was 2 years later in 18, and Goff and Dak were 2016. And Dak had a better first year than Jared, a lot better. Jared was terrible his first year. I don't even think he started every game. He started like half the games. And then Jared goes to a Super Bowl, but then he has a downturn, and now he's back up. And I think he's kind of figured the sport out. And I think Dak at the same time, they figured the game out just a lot better. And Jared still has his issues with pressure, and Dak seems to now have issues with road play, and that's really their main. And when you blitz Dak, he's going to pick you apart generally.
Honestly, the guy that I look at when I think of, and not play style, just trajectory in terms of bouncing back and starting to resurrect his career. The guy I think of when I think of Baker Mayfield is Tannehill. Like, where it's like there were expectations, first round pick, considered a bit of a bust, a guy who was down and a lot of people had like counted out, and then turned it around, became a legitimate option at quarterback for Tennessee. Like, not just like, oh, you can get by with him. Like, played really well for a couple years for Tennessee. Like, Tannehill was a good quarterback there for a little while. And so I do think that Baker's trajectory reminds me probably most of him. But, I mean, I would not count out Baker continuing to progress a little bit because
Did you give a long-term deal?
Right, that's their decision.
And define long-term or define money. Like, you're not going to give him $60 million a year. You're not going to reset the market with him.
No, but I mean, approach him probably similar to the way they did with Tannehill, which was he signed Tannehill got like a 3-year like deal that was near the top of the market and average, but obviously had all these little like escalators and like things in there, these caveats. And so I would
you give money to Fields or Baker first?
Fields or oh man,
serious question.
Yeah,
probably about the same.
Ooh. I think Baker's more advanced.
Because Michael Lombardi thinks that Justin Fields is getting 40 because of Daniel Jones. He's like, yo, that fine. I'm not upper tier, but the NFL gave him 40, so I need 40.
I mean, 40's outside the top 10. Like 40 is the new 25.
40 for a quarterback is nothing. Think of that. That's nothing, and that's double what Romo ever got.
I mean, Fields did play pretty well coming off of the injury. Like, he played better down the stretch than he had been. And it's because he started running more, and he was I just part of me wonders if it's like, do you guys just not know how to use him? Do you guys not know how to like foster his talent? Did Luke Getsy not have any clue? Like,
yes, because I mean, look at the beginning of the year. There were games where he had 2 rush attempts for Justin Fields.
And Jared Goff, after yesterday's win, second ever NFC Championship game, they get there before the Cowboys, said this is not an accident.
We've said this a million times about how it's the same group. It's not like we've added a ton. It's a lot of the same guys, and Brad and Dan have been very intentional about bringing in those type of guys who can handle moments like today and moments like last week and ups and downs of a season. And I think it's all been intentionally done by them, and we're not here by accident.
So they're doing this chant with him too, apparently.
I know, the Jared Goff chant.
Yeah.
Jared Goff.
They're like chanting it really early on yesterday. You heard it at the end of the game as well. I just never thought, like, I knew Mike Zimmer would hate Kirk Cousins' guts, like this tough guy versus whatever you think or label Kirk as. And I just thought Jared Goff with Dan Campbell would be the same thing.
Same thing. I thought
really
exactly
did.
this. I
was wrong.
And I think in the beginning, like, they did not get along. I don't think Dan liked him at all. I think Jared is maybe tougher than that California persona, blonde hair, beach bum.
I mean,
maybe he is. I don't know.
Dan Campbell talked about that last week. Like, he's like, when we started 0-10-1, he's like, I learned so much about Jared Goff and how tough he is and how resilient he is. And he's like, I made up in my mind then, like, I will go to war with Jared Goff any day. He's like, because when things were awful, he came to work, continued to prepare the right way, and showed toughness.